Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. I'm Nick and this is MSFS Flight Plans, a nifty little corner of the sim community where we don't just explore aircraft but the entire planet as we try our very best to locate the coolest, neatest looking, most interesting spots on Earth. And as we do that, I try to share as much information about the sites as I can possibly squeeze into my brain the day before each flight. And today we are just east of Atlanta, Georgia on the second leg of our Rocking Out Tour, a series dedicated to spotting the largest pieces of exposed rock around the world. And this one makes all the top 10 lists that I could find. It's called Stone Mountain, and I think it will also take the cake as the best looking of all of our landmarks because as you're going to see, it is really incredible and very well modeled. And even though there's plenty of population out here, all the most interesting stuff to talk about other than this rock is over by Atlanta, which we'll do a dedicated flight for at some point. But this thing is so cool that I wanted something slow enough to really take it in, and I felt like if we flew something faster over from Atlanta, it would just zip by too fast to do it any justice. So I decided to hop in the Astro 1 from Got Friends, and I didn't think we would ever find a trip suitable for this thing, but this one is going to be perfect. I think actually it would probably work well for all those canyons by Victoria Falls too. I was just thinking about that as I was landing this thing. That'd probably be a fun trip, so maybe we'll do that if we don't take one of the helis out there. At any rate, it takes 0 seconds to start this up, so let's check out the Google map and get our bearings, and then we'll be on our way. I'm going to go ahead and just turn the battery... No, I'm not, because the battery dies really fast, so I'll turn the battery on before we get going. Okay, here's Florida, here's Georgia, here's Atlanta, and as we zoom on in there, here's where Stone Mountain is. And you can't really see the airport. It's so small it's not marked on here. But the airport we're leaving from is right on here, which I'll tell you about once we're up in the air. We're going to come across this thing here, head up this way, follow this little chain of lakes, and then here's where the big stone is. So we'll just circle over the top of that, come back around this way, and land at a little airport that's a nice little surprise I found for us right over here. So it'll probably be a pretty quick trip. And when you look at the little NavMap flight plan, which of course I will link in the video description, I've got it drawn out between two airports. The one we're landing at is not marked in the sim, which I'll tell you about once we get out there. Okay, so start her up. Give it just a second to test everything. As I was reading about this thing, Got Friends, the developer, said that they did not use any of the native models for this thing. They built their own model, so it's not using the helicopter flight dynamics or the planes, and it's cool. It's really fun to fly. And if you're thinking about getting this and you don't have it already, if you want to avoid some frustration like I experienced, I got this thing up in the air and it was jerking all over the place. I did not know what the heck was going on. And all these lights were lit up here. You can put different modes here where it'll track the terrain. If you want to fly really low, it'll hover automatically. It's got a little boost, and sport mode makes it a little more nimble. But as I was trying to control it, it just kept jerking all around, and I was like, what is going on? So I uninstalled it, reinstalled it, was still doing it. And then I decided to read the manual. And all of these different modes are linked to your external lights if you have them set up for the plane. So I had to shut off all those lights. Here, I'll turn one on so you can see what I'm talking about. If you turn the beacon on, that one will come on there. Well, the boost comes on when you turn your nav lights on, but that was a nice relief because now it flies just fine. Okay, if you guys are ready, let's go ahead and get going. Let me get my little nav map adjusted over here, and we'll be on our way. All right, here we go. I have attached it also. It's the default key binding is the prop speed is connected to your throttle. I adjusted it to my collective, so that feels a little bit more natural to me because my collective's on my left and I'm working the stick with my right, so it was a little bit weird to switch those around and use the throttle on the other side, and to have a bigger range of motion for my collective, so that was a little bit better. Up we go. And just tilt it forward a little bit. And we are on our way. All of Atlanta, the metro area, is photogrammetry out here. As you can see, it's mostly default stuff, but the mountain itself looks incredible. Doesn't look autogen at all. So this place we're leaving from is called Whispering Pines Air Park, and it's an aviation community. In fact, we'll fly over the community part of it here. We'll turn to the right a little bit. With 28 homes and hangars, there's some of them down there. And they opened this place in 1971. And as you can see, all of those homes are not next to the airport, so you got to drive your plane through the roads of the town, or the community, to get to the airport, which I thought was pretty cool. So that paved runway is 2,500 feet long, and they said there was a grass one too, but that wasn't marked in the sim. There's a big open grass spot on the northern end. There's a mountain over there, see it? To our right. But it looks to be about half the length of the main strip, the grass one does, so maybe they're just landing on the grass next to the main one, because that would be a really short area to land. Which I guess if everybody had bush planes, they could do it. Alright, so let's come over this way just a little bit, because there's a few spots that are worth just mentioning as we head on out there. The first we're going to see is going to be down to our left. It's a big lake, which is private, belonging to a development called Norris Lake, which is also the name of the lake. And it's a good size. I think they said it's 96 acres. And they must have it stocked up pretty well with fish, because on their website they said they have a bunch of big fishing tournaments out there every year. Even though that's default houses, if you've ever been up around Atlanta, all the neighborhoods they've built in the last 20 years really look like that. All those spec homes, they just throw them in there right on top of each other, and they really do look just like that. I have been up here a lot. My dad used to live in Alpharetta, which is just on the other side of Stone Mountain there, probably 20 miles. So I spent a lot of time up here. All right, there's Norris Lake. We can just barely see it on our left up there just ahead, so we'll come over that. Give it a little more throttle. We've only got about halfway now. You can see the batteries under there at 96%. And they said the flight time for this thing is about 20 minutes, so you're not taking any long trips in this. But if you've never been up around northern Georgia, it is really nice. It's just starting to get into the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains up here, which is nice if you like it hilly but not mountainous. The weather's always pretty nice. And all these towns, just a big sprawl from the city, which is really on the other side of the mountain. You can't see the skyscrapers from here because I do have the terrain level of detail turned down a little bit just because everything's photogrammetry. So there's Norris Lake there, and there's this big community around it here. And I'm going to see if we can see all the docks and stuff on the satellite map. It's just peppered with docks and piers and stuff all around this side of it, so we'll see if we can see those down here to the left. And about a mile to the east of this, which we'll also fly over just to see if we can see it, is a private grass strip called LT World, like Lima Tango. But that was a little bit too close to the landmark for our departure. If we did that, the whole trip would have been about 5 minutes long. I'm not seeing any docks down there, or nearly as many houses as there are in real life. I think the trees are covering up a lot of them here in the sim. All right, there's that strip right in front of us. See it over there? And you can take off from there in the sim if you want to get even closer. Boy, that's an awfully big crane for building a house. Look at the size of that thing. That may not be accurate. That probably should have been a radio tower. And there's another strip out here that I'll show you at the end just to tell you not to try to land there or take off there. It is marked in the sim. It's a grass strip, but it has trees right next to the runway, and it did not get modeled correctly. So I'll try to remember to show you where that is, because it was tough. Real tough. I couldn't get down on there even with a bush plane. I was originally going to fly from Lake Lanier, head south down here, but again, I wanted to take a plane that would be slow enough once we got to Stone Mountain, and it just took way too long, even though it's only about 12 miles north of here. But that's a cool flight if you haven't flown around Lake Lanier. All right, so on to Stone Mountain. Believe it or not, this thing is the most visited tourist attraction in the entire state of Georgia, which says a lot about this place, or maybe a lot about the rest of the state, depending on how you position that claim. And it peaks out at just over 1,600 feet in total elevation, rising about 825 feet above the surrounding terrain. And I've been through this area a lot, as I mentioned before, but I've never visited the park itself. And it's really crazy when you're driving around out here. As you can see, everything else is pretty flat. There are some gently rolling hills, but because of all the trees, you really don't see this thing until you're pretty close to it. Close enough for it to appear shockingly massive if you aren't expecting it, and I'm usually not, no matter how many times I've been out here. Okay, so it looks like we're kind of getting into photogrammetry now, because that looks awfully detailed down there. Looks like a Kohl's or something. Or we might be overspeeding a little bit. I can hear that thing whistling around a little bit, so I'll just drop my throttle / collective. In geology speak, this thing is called a Pluton monolith, which starts life as a giant ball of magma. And this one started life a very long time ago, with estimates putting it at around 350 million years old. The Appalachian chain itself is pretty old. And it wasn't always perched on the surface like that. There's Atlanta off in the distance. You can see it there, behind the mountain. So it wasn't always sitting up here like this, where you could just see the whole thing. At one time, it may have been buried up to 10 miles underground, which tells you just how much erosion can happen over 300 million years. And what we see here is just a tiny fraction of the whole structure. If you tried to dig it all out, they said it would stretch about 9 miles to the north. So that's the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. And as impressive as this earth wart is, the main feature out here is the massive bas-relief mural we're going to see on the northern side of it. It is the largest one of those in the world, at 90 feet high and 190 feet wide. And perhaps most impressive is that it is carved 400 feet up from the ground, although it doesn't really look like that in the sim. But we'll get close to it. Maybe it'll feel a little bit higher in the air. The monument itself is a bit of a Confederate Hall of Fame with depictions of Jefferson Davis, Robert E. Lee, and Stonewall Jackson. And it officially opened in 1965, exactly 100 years to the day from the date of Lincoln's assassination. But I'm not entirely sure if that was more of an olive branch or a big middle finger, because people are proud of their heritage in these parts. Not so much as it was when I first moved down south. It's gotten watered down quite a bit. But as the most robust of all the Confederate monuments, you can probably imagine the contention surrounding this place. For a while it was designated the sacred site of the KKK. More recently there's been some heated debate about removing the mural entirely, which I'm going to bet will eventually happen if the current trend of sterilizing the history of the U.S. continues. They've already pulled down all the monuments down here in Jacksonville and renamed all the schools that were formerly named after Confederate generals, and we had quite a few of those. Boy, there's some more really big cranes. Wonder why those are showing up like that. But I kind of get the school thing. If I was a black kid going to a school named after someone that was fighting for the preservation of slavery, I'd probably have a problem with that too. Well, you can see a lot more of the city now, can't you? And it stretches forever. Atlanta's just a huge city. So you got the main downtown area here, and then as you head north, there's like these little mini cities that stretch all along the interstate going up there. And I think the two big interstates are 85 and 75. 75 goes up north by Kentucky and all that. We saw some more of that. And then 85 goes a little bit further to the west, I believe. Yep, that's a rundown airport. And yep, that's where we're going to land. I'll tell you about that once we come back around. Let's get that pointer over there. So since this is an aviation channel, I should mention an incident they had out here in the early 1900s. On May 7th of 1928, a mail plane crashed into this thing. The pilot survived, and so did his mail. He grabbed it all out of the wreckage and walked down the mountain and got it all delivered. Boy, that is a dedication to duty. I received a package sent from the north side of Jacksonville last week that was postmarked 6 weeks ago. And that seems to be happening with alarming frequency lately. All right, so there's the big carving. And again, that doesn't look, maybe those trees are just really tall, but that doesn't look like 400 feet to me. But that looks about accurate. I mean, I've seen a lot of pictures of it. That seems about right. And there's the big gondola going up to the top of it there. And all this area here is a big park. They got a little railroad down there, a dinosaur museum, some playgrounds. And the gondola is called the Sky Ride. And that'll take you up to the top if you're not as determined as that male pilot was. And over here they've got a big replica plantation that they built in 1963 with the original promotional material referring to these slave quarters as neat and tidy as to not offend anyone's sensibilities. And they've renamed that place Historic Square. And I'll bet it may be nearing the end of its lifespan as well. So there it is. Look at that. Look how detailed that is. Not just that, but the whole thing. Look at that. The only thing that really doesn't look great is when we come up around the top of it here, there's some pointy rocks, and some parts of the gondola parking area up here are a little bit pointy too. But that is unbelievable. And that is not an NSYM POI. At least it didn't show up for me as an NSYM POI, and it's not an add-on either. We don't have any add-ons on this trip. How crazy is that? And they've got some freshwater pools up here on the top that are home to fairy and rain shrimp that, as the name implies, only appear during the rainy season. If it gets too dry, they can hunker down and go dormant until it gets wet again. Look at that. And look at the view from up here. Unbelievable. Yeah, see those spiky things? And that may be right. Again, I've never been out here, but those seem a little bit too pointy. Some of these rocks are a little bit too geometric, but other than that, I mean, they could have just left those off and left the big stone thing. Looks incredible. That is amazing. So cool. And because I had never flown out here before I got that gondola pack, I don't know if that was already out here. I'm guessing it might have been since they did such a good job with everything else. Or it may be part of that cable cars pack that I just threw in there. But I'm glad it's there now because that's really cool. And look, there's even a little helipad down there. We're not going to land there because I want to show you this airport. And this thing here is a huge church. And I didn't think we'd be able to see it from up here, but there's a road that I've taken out here. I've driven by this thing probably 20 times because there's big soccer fields out here I used to take my kids up to when they'd have tournaments up here. But man, when you drive by this thing, it is massive. And at one time, I looked to see what religion it was, and I don't think it's Christianity. I seem to remember it being something a little bit different, but I don't recall what that was. And this is the Stone Mountain Golf Club out here. And on their website in huge letters it says that that is the #1 destination for golf. Which seems a bit presumptuous to me, but I'm not a golfer, so what do I know? And look at this, there's a big stadium right here which I could not find on the map, so it must be torn down now. But I don't know what that was for. It's not for a high school, way too big for a high school, and all these are just retail places out here, so I don't know that there wasn't a college or anything out here. I don't know what the deal with that thing is. Alright, so when I first flew out here to this airport, I was like, what is that? It kind of took me by surprise because it was not marked in the sim. And then as we got closer, as you saw, the runway looks like it's in pretty bad shape. So once I looked it up, that thing's called the Stone Mountain Airport, and it was open from 1962 to 1996. And they shut her down, and now they let RC pilots and hobbyists use it. And since according to the Got Friends website, you don't need a private pilot's license to fly this thing, I guess I'd call this a hobbyist toy. And they have one, it's based on a real-life thing called the Jetson 1. And I checked out their website. I don't know if they've actually released any yet, but you can order them about $92,000 for one of these if you want one. Just better have a big trailer to haul it around, I guess. But it folds up pretty small. Probably throw it in the back of a Suburban. Alright, so let's see if we can come on down here. And it was hard to get any details about this. They said they didn't know if the original runway was 3,000 feet or 2,700 feet. And at one time there was a crosswind grass runway, and no one had any idea how long that one was. And I couldn't even really see a marking in the trees of where it would have been. Alright, this is a little bit more challenging than a helicopter. It doesn't blow around or gimbal quite as much, which makes it easier, but it's kind of touchy on the throttle, I guess you'd call it, or the power. But it does hover really easily, so we'll see if we can just get it down without dropping it real hard. I'll come down past these trees, and then we'll check out a little NavMap real quick. This looks like a nice area. Man, imagine being an RC plane enthusiast and having something like this to fly them around at. That would be amazing. Alright, so now I just have to really try to not drop it to the ground, which is not easy. Whoa. Come on. Just barely get down. It'll crash the sim if I hit too hard, so I'm really trying to finesse this. There we go. Perfect. Oh, there we go. All right. That went to it. And there you go. You put the throttle down, they just stop. Must have some good brakes on this. Okay, so just a couple things to show you, again, if you're thinking about getting this. So if you want to see through it, you just click the little seatbelt there, and you can see through the bottom, which is awesome. And these things here, if you don't have them bound anywhere else, you can click on these and it'll adjust the different modes that you have over there. And you can also, look, throw a cage on there with some nice blades on the end of it. If you want to do a little tilling or plowing with this thing, that's awesome. Just looked a little too bulky for me, but that's cool. And then again, if you want to turn, if it's too loud for you, and you can hear it wasn't too loud, but you can put these earplugs on, and it gets really, really quiet. And then to power it off, just hit the power button. That's it. Okay, so let's look at a little NavMap real quick. And you may recall our last few flights, my airplane trail was kind of like a thick rainbow color. Now it's gone back to the old school dotted line, which I think I like a little bit more because I felt like I had to keep pulling it off there before, but we'll pull that off again anyway because it's got some of my former flights. Okay, so when you take this, I redrew this a little bit to help me out for this flight, but the actual flight plan looks a little bit more like that, and then this departure looks a little bit more like that, so you're not having to take a super tight turn there, and just deleted that. So that's what the actual flight plan looks like if you want to load it up, and I had you coming into this airport over here just because it has an ILS that's already in the heading that you're going, so if you want to try to land ILS, you can do that. And this should be a pretty good distance, up to, I don't know, maybe 2,500, 3,000 feet if you're flying by here to check it out. Okay, so a few things to look at real quick. First, this neighborhood. So this is the air park neighborhood on this side of it over here. And you can see all the hangars. See them? And then here's the main road that you'd have to drive down to get to the airport. There don't appear to be too many of them on this side. These all look like, well, there's one right there. But that can't be the grass strip. That seems really short. So I'm guessing they probably just, I don't know why you'd want to land on the grass if you had a regular runway right next to it, but I guess you could. But how cool would that be? It reminds me of that place we saw in the Ocala flight where Travolta has a house. All right, there's Norris Lake. Look at all these docks they got around it. And you can see a lot more of that in real life than in the sim. They had too many trees in there. And then here's that little strip. So let's take the airports off real quick so you can see down in there. I could get up and down from that one. And if you want to get in the parking, there's one spot right over here if you want to fly this or a helicopter or something so you can take off over there. And the other one is, let me bring it back on so you don't try to land there. Where's the airport button? It's not that one. Well, maybe it is. No, it's not that one. Well, now I can't find it. Maybe it is that one. I mean, it is really, that can't be it because that's way too open. There is another one somewhere out here that is just a grass strip that is really buried in the trees and is impossible to land at. This can't be it over here too. That's, it might be it. Sleepy Hollow? Well, if you're looking around here, maybe you'll find it. Oh, there it is. That's it right there. Sunset Strip, I think. That was just buried in the trees, and the trees were too close to the sides of it. I could not, that might not be it either. Anyway, well, cruise around here if you want to explore, you'll find it. And that boat probably doesn't belong there either. What is going on between the cranes and the boat? Okay, so real quick, look at Stone Mountain. All right, so here's the big park out here. Here is where the carving is on the side of it, the boss relief. And then here is where the little sky ride leaves from. And there's little dino parks out here. Here's where the plantation area is, the state house or whatever they call that now. I should go out there sometime. We're up here so often. I just want to get a look from the top of this thing. That looked incredible up there. The weather's always so nice. And there's that church. Look at that thing. Well, Mount Carmel Christian School. It must be a Christian church. But it seemed like there was something odd about it when I was reading it. It didn't seem like it was mainline. And then here's where that stadium would have been. And it looks like they built a townhouse and residential area out there. So, yeah, they must have built it over that. Not sure what that was. Because here's the airport right here. And we saw it. It was about this vicinity right here. Let me know if you're from the area what that thing was. Because it was a big stadium. And then here's the old airport. So this marking right here might be where the crosswind grass strip was. Because there is a little depression there in the trees. But I thought that was a cool little Easter egg for us to go and land in a place like that. Very neat. All right, so that's Stone Mountain, guys. Number 2. Up next will probably be either Gibraltar or that place out in Sri Lanka, which was really, really cool. So we'll be heading out to one of those next. Stay tuned. Had an absolute blast as always, and I cannot wait to see y'all again in the skies. Later.